We're going to start, gentlemen. The Public Administration Committee is called to order at 4 o'clock on Monday, the 20th of July. May we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Briggs? Here. Councillor Fitzgerald? Here. Councillor Shane?
Here.
Councillor Schilling will be here shortly, and Councillor Spivey is absent.
Have a quorum. All righty, you have the minutes of our last meeting. Does anybody have anything that needs to be added, subtracted, or changed? Then I will entertain a motion.
To approve?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Next up, original art on buildings. Over to you, Brian.
So this is referring to our municipal code ordinance in section 8.900, specifically 8.910 is the definition section of that code. And so this is murals on buildings, right? And so we modified this code a couple of years ago. And at the time, the intention was to remove any permitting requirements, right? Just to have standards that could be enforced in case someone built a mural or painted a mural that was inconsistent with the standards, we would have code enforcement go out and do that. So there was kind of an orphan language to reference for obtaining a permit in one of the definitions. And so staff's recommendation is just to remove that reference from that code so that the standards still all apply, they're unchanged. We're just removing that reference to the definition language.
Really just clean up.
It's just a cleanup. So as you read the code language, you can see that it's how that would be affected. We would just take out kind of the last clause of that sentence to clean that up. So really just looking for kind of consensus from the committee to do that. We do have a motion to direct the city attorney to draft an amendment to Dallas Section Code 8.910 to remove the reference to the obtaining a permit.
I move to direct the city attorney to draft an amendment to Dallas City Code Section 8.910 to remove the reference to obtaining a permit. Looking for
Can I just
second.
ask a question before I
Let's
second?
get this moved and seconded,
Oh,
then we
second.
can have discussion.
Okay.
Okay, moved and seconded. You're up.
So are you just going to get rid of the words "of permit"? Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, so if you look under the definitions, under original art, mural, and mural, the final clause says, having received approval of a permit as described in this chapter.
It says
So-
"of permit," so not "of a permit."
Right.
So I was just wondering, is it just "of permit"? that
No,
you're-
so we'll probably just end the sentence after the word aesthetic purposes, and we'll get rid of having received approval of permit as described in this chapter. We'll get rid of that last clause. That would be my recommendation. So the city attorney can draft it and the full council will have an opportunity to see it. But that would be what I would recommend to the attorney, is just get rid of that last clause referencing a permit.
Shouldn't have "having received approval" in this chapter?
Process, there's nothing to
But you
approve.
do have to approve the project.
No, don't. So we allow how the code was written was to allow murals to be placed on buildings, subject to the standards, right? So
Like approval.
as long as they're built, as long as they're painted, on the wall and they're consistent with the standards, they don't have to get our blessing, right? They can just do that. So, but if they painted like a mural that was inconsistent with the standards, like let's say they painted an advertisement for like Coca-Cola, that's inconsistent with the standards, we would then enforce on them to say, hey, that mural's inconsistent with the standards, it needs to be removed.
So, but shouldn't you approve it then before they do it so that it doesn't go through all the?
This was adopted was to not have a permit process, right? Just to allow it to occur, organically, people can just do them. Most people, I would say, that wanted to paint a mural, this came up because we just had a mural approved by the city. And they came in and said, hey, we want to put a mural on our building. What do we have to do for that? And we actually went through a permit process because we referenced a permit. And they were happy to do that. But we applied the standards and said, here's the standards, make sure we can see the artwork. We did, and it was done. But the original intention of the code was to not require that permit process to take place. So
This is just like dealing with any kind of nuisance. We don't, if the grass gets too long, we tell them to cut it. If they don't, we take appropriate action, but
But you already have all the rules and all
Yeah, the rules are,
everything laid out.
there, so people that are doing, if they wanted to paint, someone called us and said, hey, I want to put a mural up, what do I have to do? We would reference the code section and say, here's the code section, we would send it to them if they needed it, and then say, just make sure you're following these rules.
so we're striking everything beginning with the word having.
That's what I would recommend. I don't know if the attorney has any words of wisdom on that, but
That's what I would do, yeah.
Discussion. All right, we have a motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Done. All right, next, sidewalk repairs.
all right. So we have a sidewalk repair program in the city. We tried digging down the history of how that came to be, and we couldn't find anything. It's not codified in the code. We don't have an administrative policy. There's not a council policy or a council decision that was made in the past. And so, but the current program allows a reimbursement for sidewalk repair up to $500. It's been $500 since we've been having this program. The program has been around for many years. So it's kind of not consistent with maybe the cost, of projects as they've got more expensive over time. So the intention is to kind of formalize the policy, have a council review a policy, approve it, and then also allow the reimbursement of an eligible project to be up to $2,500 instead of the $500. We feel that one, that would be more attractive for people that need to repair their sidewalks, an incentive for them to actually do it. And then we would also cap the amount of projects that could be done at a cost of $25,000. So if you had 10 projects that maxed out the amount of reimbursement, you could, or, they all requested $2,500, you could do 10 projects. If there were some that were smaller, maybe $500 or $1,000, you could get more projects done. It would be up to $25,000 per fiscal year. So that's the kind of the vision for what this looks like. We would certainly want to craft a policy that would have, some kind of strict eligibility requirements. We don't want to just, permit someone who has a perfectly, good sidewalk in working order. They just want to replace their sidewalk because they think it looks old. If it functions and works, we're not going to allow that. But if it's, there's obviously, cracking, breaking up of the sidewalk, it's a tripping hazard, tree roots are, breaking up the sidewalk or stuff like that. Expanding soil is going to often do that. Those would be the types of things that we would include in the policy to allow as an eligible project. So that's kind of where we are on this. I'm looking for any feedback from the committee on if they feel that we're kind of moving in the right direction, or maybe projects that you feel should be eligible or not eligible.
A comment, but I'll go last if somebody else has something.
Part of what's driving this is, I think Brian and I received an email a few months ago from an individual who lived on Jasper. And usually where we have sidewalk issues is because of a tree or a roots from the tree. And he was challenging us in a certain way that the tree was planted per plans and specs back in the day, and now it's causing problems. He did it, or whoever planted it the right way. Why should he have to pay to repair it all now? So,
It's like saying if the paint is peeling on your house, why, you painted it once, why should you have to do it again?
Right.
I don't buy that.
so the concern also is that our town is aging. I see a lot more of this around town. I think it's going to be an issue. So, unrelated to this, I'd like to revisit our tree planting specifications if we can, to see if there's a way to mitigate some of this in the future. Probably Mr. Schilling's most favorite subject matter, but
Trees?
anyway,
I like trees. Is this a match?
So yes, this would be a
Okay.
match, so it would be 50, so we would still have a 50% matching requirement, which is what our current program has, up to $2,500. So you could only give the $2,500 if your project costs $5,000 or more, right? And it's a reimbursement, so it's not like an upfront cost or an upfront payment. It would be, they do the project, they then show us paid invoices, we go out and inspect that the work was done, and then we would cut a check.
This isn't a hill I want to die on, but I would prefer, I like the direction this is going. It's the substance is correct, I think, but I would rather than putting dollar amounts in here, I would rather have the ability to set those by resolution so that we don't have to pass an ordinance if we ever want to change it. Other than that, I think it's fine.
You can have the,
The dollar amounts.
oh, well, the policy would not be adopted by ordinance, it would be adopted by resolution.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
well then,
yeah,
I
so the
withdraw
council
my
policy would
objection.
be a resolution.
Okay.
I reference an ordinance that just talks about the responsibility of the adjacent property owner being responsible for the maintenance of the sidewalk. So that's the reference to the ordinance there.
Oh, so if we're going to do this whole thing by resolution?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
the
fine
creation
then.
of the policy would just be approved by council resolution.
Great.
Just because it piqued my mind, and we're talking about sidewalks, did we correct that section where the inner block sidewalks, did we ever go back?
So I think that's still on our list. Yeah.
I don't remember that coming up again since the last time you raised it.
With the policy, it hadn't been, it hadn't been changed for probably 15 years.
So so Michael's comment is unrelated to the sidewalk repair program and the tree planting details, but the tree planting detail, in the particular reference or project you referenced, the detail was adopted like 2 years after the home was built and this sidewalk was installed and the trees were planted. And that was like in 2008, 2006, somewhere around there. And then we've since adopted a new tree planting detail. I think it was last done in 2013. I'm looking at Michael to kind of give me a head nod. I think 2013 was maybe the last detail that we've had. So it's about 12 years old. It's a tree detail, I think that's pretty, it's expensive. It's,
Oh, extensive.
extensive, yeah, no, sorry.
You put root barriers in now.
Right, so we require.
Forces the trees
Yeah,
to
we
go
require
down.
root barriers in with new tree wells, or, street trees. So hopefully we're not seeing, with new construction in the last, 15 or so years that we're having trees, pushing up these sidewalks. You really see these in older parts of town, where trees are planted, right against the sidewalk, or the trees have just gotten so big that sometimes the tree trunks themselves are what's pushing the sidewalks out of the way. And so this issue is most prevalent with tree roots and trees themselves in the really kind of older parts of town with trees that are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. But the new standard since 2013 really drives those roots and the root issues, further down into the ground, so you're not having the impacts on the sidewalks.
That kind of addresses your concern then.
Expected.
So so I can have Michael Pierce, our support services supervisor, come up and talk about kind of the process of tree planting and how those get inspected. You want to come talk about that? Just at the podium here.
So I guess I would start off with replacement or new trees.
So new trees. So if a
subdivision
new
level?
subdivision's going in, how do we, either permit or make sure that those trees are being planted consistent with the design details that we have for trees?
Sure. So those are inspected by an inspector, whether it be myself or one of my inspectors. Go out and ensure that the root barrier is placed appropriately. And per design, we ensure that the trees are placed where they were mapped out on the subdivision, the approved plans. During the house construction, corner lots are a little interesting. Depending on where that front door is going to be, if it's near a stop sign, we will remove that tree and relocate it in a different area where it doesn't obstruct that stop sign.
Regulate what types of trees are permissible, species of trees.
As per our tree design manual, I think we have 32, 34 trees on our approved street tree list.
They're not all shallow root. I mean, there are some shallow root also, but the root barrier is 2 feet, correct? Approximately 2 feet, and it's an impenetrable barrier, basically, that forces the trees down.
At that point, the roots shouldn't upheave the sidewalk.
just ask, just for curiosity's sake, what if it is like the trunk that's pushing the sidewalk out of place? When you replace it, do you have to do something about the tree? Would the homeowner have to, or do you just kind of build around it or put the new sidewalk around it or?
Kind of depends on the property owner. Do they want to remove that tree and replace it with a different one that's not more shallow root level? We can make it ADA compliant to go over that.
Some of those big, like maple in the old neighborhoods, you know, like Brian was saying, they're massive trees, so.
In those older neighborhoods, what we do from inspection wise is we find an option to maintain that tree. I mean, it's a tree they want to keep. So we can either go up or go around as long as we're within the right of way.
Okay, because that could be really expensive, taking out one of those big trees.
A great example of that over on Kings Valley Highway south of Washington. It's on the west side of the road. There's a large, I think it's a fir or a pine tree. It's really big trunk, and the sidewalk goes around it. You know, you can,
Cedar or something.
yeah, it might be, but there's a, you know, the sidewalk goes, you know, right down parallel with Kings Valley Highway, and all of a sudden you go, whoop,
Okay.
a big circle around the
So
tree.
Okay,
There are some parts of town where we have some very old trees.
We try to do our best to preserve those trees if they're in good health. Yeah.
Tree roundabout. So what about replacing?
So if they replace, if they're wanting to replace their sidewalk and that tree is, say, you know, past its life, maybe remove the tree, grind up the stump, and then replace the sidewalk. It's in their best interest to continue the sidewalk on an even plane versus trying to get over those existing roots. Yeah.
Is a root barrier required under the replacement?
Yes. Yep, and the location of the replacement, as long as it's within the right-of-way, the location can be varying.
This is probably a no-brainer question, but just for the sake of completeness, I assume that when the homeowner is replacing an existing tree, all the new rules apply, root barriers, species, everything applies, just as if it were a new, okay.
That goes for any modification. So if you're replacing your sidewalk and you're coming up to an ADA, you know, curb ramp, you have to also replace that. So you can't stop short just because you don't want to do that. That's discrimination.
even if it's not affected?
Certain proximity, it can be considered discrimination. It's a,
Yeah, the ADA rules really
But
dictate.
even if the ADA ramp is not affected in any way?
Right. So,
there would be no
if
issue.
the ADA ramp complies with current standards, then you don't have to replace the ADA ramp. But if you come up to an intersection that does not have an ADA ramp, or the ADA ramp does not meet current ADA standards, the ADA rules will say if you're doing work within so many feet or, you know, the certain proximity of that ramp, you would need to replace it if it doesn't meet standards. So, and that's another reason why, you know, also increasing the reimbursement cost of $2,500 makes some sense, because their project, they might think, hey, I'm just replacing these two sidewalk panels.
Might be more than
It might
that.
be more than that, because they might have to do the ADA component. And then they're gonna, you know, like to have this higher reimbursement factor calculated for their project.
which is definitely a thing.
Track my request to review the tree policies if we have the root barriers in play right now.
Yeah, they're in place
That's all
today.
I was concerned about.
So the consensus is go forward with this?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll craft a policy. Do you want that to come back to the administration committee, or do you just want to take that policy straight to council?
Cool.
All right,
Straight counsel.
so we'll craft the policy.
Save you explaining it twice.
Yep. No, so we'll craft that policy and we'll have it before the council probably sometime, maybe late August or early September.
So Briggs, I would say if you look at our standard detail for LIDA, you'll see the standard detail for street trees. It'll show that barrier, and we no longer have the watering tubes. Now it's a deep root watering system that is included in that
Sacks that
detail.
are
Yep.
Attached to them. Okay. Good.
Righty. I think we're done with that. Expansion of the central business district.
Chair
Can I
Shane,
just,
so.
I have one
Oh,
more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's okay. If a homeowner doesn't want to replace the tree, do they have to?
So it's kind of a loaded question. So if they have a diseased or dying tree, then yes, they are responsible for the maintenance and the replacement of that tree.
Has to be a tree there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So if there's a tree existing, and let's say that tree is diseased or dying, it becomes a hazard, they're responsible for the removal and replacement of that tree. Yep. Perfect. Yeah, so the next topic is the potential expansion of the central business district. I'll invite our economic development specialist, Tyler Ferrari, to come up and present on this topic. And as he does that, I'll just remind the committee, this is a discussion topic that our chair raised a few months ago. We've met on this a few times now, so.
Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon to all of you. As you may remember, back at the March meeting of the committee, we had a first round of discussion on this. And there were some key points of feedback that the committee presented that we move forward with in terms of doing some additional research on. And what those items was concerning the feedback received from residents in the area from previous outreach with projects like the TGM project. Really looking at the consideration for potential conflicts of uses if businesses were to move into these currently residential parts of Main Street and Jefferson Street, if the zoning were changed or the CBD were to be expanded. Considering an option like a transition of zones rather than expanding the CBD. And specifically, I believe it was called out a transition from the central business district to neighborhood commercial zoning down to the industrial zoning around the mill site. And then there was also the general concern for historic homes in the area. So between that meeting and now, we worked hard to chase down some additional information, and one other community in Oregon is doing this currently, and it's the city of Medford. So they are actively looking at expanding what they are deeming their central business district. But what differs their project from ours is their central business district is more of an area that they have defined to be bounded by streets rather than a specific type of zoning. So within their central business district, a variety of different zoning is there. It's predominantly one type of zoning, but there are still some other pieces within their actual district area, and you can see that in one of the attachments. So what's motivating their expansion of the central business district is they want to be able to meet some standards for climate-related funding and climate change prevention related funding that would require expanding the district, doing specific types of development within the district. So that motivation may not necessarily be the same here in Dallas, where our motivation may be primarily just creating more commercial space. And so what their process is focusing on is trying to capture parts of the community that they are going to see that they expect to see growth in. And that expansion of the CBD would allow for them to be able to target those areas, whether it's with new employment opportunities like offices, housing opportunities, mainly medium and high density opportunities, or other commercial opportunities. So they're more looking at this similar to how we would look at creating a new urban renewal district. This isn't like an urban renewal district at all. It's just simply a designated area that they're deeming their central business district, and it's changing based on how their community is changing and how they're expecting the community to change. But again, this is one other community that is going through the process in Oregon. And generally what we've been able to find with their process is the public generally is in support of it, public, of course, is supportive of bringing new commercial opportunities to downtown Medford, more investment to downtown Medford, more offices, but they still are grappling with conflicts of things like traffic, encroaching on some historic neighborhoods and other items like that, which would be similar to here, but on a smaller scale. But where the two comparisons really diverge is our central business district is a specific set of zoning, where theirs is simply just a designated area with a variety of zoning. So that isn't to say that this expansion couldn't look similar to what Medford is doing, in that we are doing different types of zoning and still accomplishing that same aspect of increasing our commercial land area. But I think they're a good example of this not necessarily needing to be a specific type of zoning that is being expanded. So that might be an opportunity to look at that transition that was talked about at the last meeting of commercial zones, or a mixed use zone that might want to be created by the council. And then additionally to that, we did look at some of the feedback from the exercises from the Mill Street project. There wasn't a lot of comment that was written down specifically from folks that lived in this block area. We did look at the DOT exercise that folks had there, and there was just one general comment that they want their neighborhood left alone. And I recall during the verbal feedback at the meeting, there were some folks that were concerned about increased truck traffic along Main and Jefferson. If we were to do something like expanding the couplet down to the mill site, or if we were to just have more traffic on that street in general by expanding the CBE. And then obviously folks were concerned about being next to commercial businesses when they're still living in their homes. And so that in general was a lot of the information that we were able to capture that was a response to the feedback that we received. And then you'll see at the bottom of the staff report, there's really, I think, 3 potential options that the committee can consider if they want to kind of move this process forward. And it really depends on where the committee and the council wants to prioritize a process like this. So the first one obviously is historic preservation. So if the committee wants to ensure that the historic homes and the character of the neighborhood is maintained, staff can begin to explore the creation of a historic district in that area. Other communities have residential historic districts. Salem has a residential historic district. The process that this would be very similar to what we did for the downtown district, where we would have to do a reconnaissance level survey, and then we would be able to go through and begin the actual designation process. Those are projects that can be funded with the CLG grant program, as it's been funded in the past. But that process would likely not be able to be started until 2027, because that's the next cycle we'd be eligible for CLG grants. And what the historic preservation route would do is it would essentially create a district, protect the homes from demolition, protect them from those major exterior changes. So it would keep the same character and feel of the neighborhood. And then later on, if the council wanted to go in and change the zoning there, it would allow for commercial zones, but within their pre-existing structures. The next part of this would be code changes. So if the committee were to want to rezone the area, they can explore each aspect of the city's different codes in detail and either recommend changes to better accommodate the character of the neighborhood, whether that's making adjustments to current code or creating a new kind of zoning code. And that would be what you would want to put in this area. So I believe Councilor Shane had mentioned this at the meeting with the transition zone. So if you didn't want the uses that would be allowable within a central business district or within our general commercial zones in the area, you can look at the neighborhood commercial zone or the creation of some other type of zoning category that would be a much better match for the community, for that neighborhood, so that we're not having conflicting uses. And then obviously the third option would be the status quo. And so if the committee believes that keeping the current zoning in place is the best option, then nothing new would need to be done. Or something that Brian had mentioned at the previous meeting would be tackling these potential changes as they come up. So if there is a parcel that a developer or a resident wants to turn into some kind of commercial use, that is something that code change can be done on a piecemeal basis. That might not be the most efficient way to do it, but that is certainly one option, is waiting to see how the neighborhood develops in the future and responding rather than being proactive with the code changes. So those are just the three suggested options based off what we were able to look at with the research and what was being done in Medford and other potential options that addressed the concerns previously. But I will welcome your feedback in terms of next steps of what you would like staff to take.
Question, Kim?
Can you do two things at once? Can you do like the historic preservation and then a case-by-case basis? I mean, could you do something like that?
Yeah,
So that anything coming in has to kind of,
yeah, you can do that. And the reason why I broke out the historic preservation part separately in particular is going the historic preservation route is going to make it really difficult for redevelopment to occur in the area. So I think that's something that the committee and the council as a whole would want to consider, is when they're looking at this neighborhood between the central business district and the mill site, is the priority to preserve the homes that are here and the character and the feel, or is the priority to make it as amenable to development and redevelopment as possible? Because like the downtown historic district, creating a historic district in this neighborhood would make demolition not impossible, but very difficult. So that would be a hindrance to any type of redevelopment if a developer wanted to build a new building in that area by tearing down some old homes.
is that what kind of South Salem did, like on Commercial Street with the old craftsman style homes that have dentist's office or, yeah, that's.
So South Salem is one of those neighborhoods that does have that commercial, or does have that historic residential district. And like along Commercial Street, some of those homes are preserved and transformed. And some of the homes are still private homes, but they're on the National Register. And the one addition with that is there's going to also need to be more community input with that process, and be done in a more proactive way than we did with the historic district, because there's going to be a lot more stakeholders with private homes involved.
So if I can add just a little bit to the code change process and what that might look like. So, in the central business district, we allow 5-story buildings, up to 8-story buildings with, certain setbacks on the upper floors. That would be maybe incompatible with the historic neighborhood, right? You wouldn't want to see structures of that high. So you might say, if you wanted to implement like a transition zone or a different zone that's not central business district, you could do like a mixed use downtown zone, right? So we have a mixed use zone that we're developing right now for like out at the Loch Real node and some other areas in the community, but that zone may not make sense downtown. So you might say, in this downtown mixed use downtown zone, you have, buildings that have a limited height of maybe 2 stories, right? And they are limited to a certain floor area. So you might say, they limited to 5,000 or 7,000 square feet of floor area. I'm just throwing out imaginary numbers, but, you could do that. You could, say that you limit the types of uses that are allowed in that transitional zone. So you can maybe only have professional offices or medical offices, dental offices. You could, allow, retail store or not. You could allow, just different uses that maybe are more compatible with a residential neighborhood, right? Blending of that. So that's kind of what a transitional zone would look like, where you just set the standards so that it's very specific to what you want to see. And that's another way to, not just kind of open the door wide for any use that's allowed in the downtown central business district as it sits today would be allowed, next door to my neighbor or in my neighborhood, right? So you can create that. And I would even probably couple, not the case by case scenario, but I would couple, if I'm going to couple two together, I would couple historic preservation with a code change with a transitional zone to make sure that whatever's built, in that historic neighborhood, if you create a historic neighborhood, is going to be uses that you want to see compatible with a historic neighborhood.
I can add on to that. So what Brian was referencing specifically with the square footage of floor space, that's the big differentiation between the different codes you'll see on the Medford map. So they have that so there's the majority of it is that pink area. So that's more the traditional downtown zoning, very similar to what our central business district zoning is. And that darker red is commercial zoning. The uses are pretty much identical, but the difference is the actual size of the use. And so and the big difference between some of the zones is the square footage of the use rather than the actual use itself.
So if you made it a transitional zone, as people moved out of their homes and businesses came in kind of in the home feel of the street, then you could change the zoning to where bigger, like tear downs and businesses could build, or?
So let's say you didn't have a historic district. You just had the transitional zoning. You could tear down and build consistent with what that transitional zoning allows. So again, you would want to craft your zoning to allow buildings that would be of a similar nature to a single family residence. So, you could go down to any level of detail that you want. You might even say, we don't want flat roof buildings, right? Because homes generally don't have flat roofs. And so we want to see our commercial buildings in this transitional zone have pitched roofs.
And once you do a historic district, does it have to stay that way? Is it hard to undo?
It's hard to undo historic districts. Yeah, I mean, there's a route to remove a historic district or remove a property from a historic district. The thresholds to do that is very difficult. I've gone through that process once before, and it's really challenging.
But with the transitional, you can kind of specify what you want to see there mostly.
Right. With a historic district, you're really kind of locking in those properties that are included within that boundary to the historic preservation rules of your community when they're put into play. A transitional zone, you can change zoning, a lot. It's a lot more flexible. So you can change that as the political winds change from time to time, or as the community winds change from time to time, or demographics change. So I would certainly encourage, because we want to be compatible and sensitive to the neighborhoods, right? As commercial encroaches into those neighborhoods, I would certainly advocate for a transitional zone, a mixed-use zone that's specific to the downtown and specific to that neighborhood. If we're talking about the neighborhood to the south, or if you're talking about the neighborhood to the west or to the east, whichever direction you're going, you want to make sure that your zoning really addresses kind of the look and feel of that neighborhood. As you go south, I don't know of any structures that I can think of that are 3-story, right? I mean, there are some 2 stories, but predominantly it's actually single story.
So people that are in their homes and they don't want to leave their homes, things can kind of look similar
Right.
until they're.
Right. So again, you can put some pretty hefty design standards into that transitional zone to say, again, you can say we're not going to allow flat roof buildings. You have to have a pitched roof building. So if you're going to build new, it's got to be pitched roof. And you can say the square footage of your building has to be less than 8,000 square feet. So it's got to be smaller, right? And so a 2-story building, 8,000 square feet maximum, pitched roof. You could even say that the materiality, you could say the side, it's got to be, like a lap siding, as opposed to, a concrete tilt-up building, right? You're not going to allow those. So you can get pretty specific in that transitional zone to ensure that you're building buildings that are going to blend in with the architecture and the structures that are there. I would also, support.
As residences are less and less, then you can kind of change with that.
That could be
and-
loosened up over time, yeah, as you see more transition. I would also, encourage the council and the committee to consider uses that are more compatible with residential neighborhoods than those that are not, right? We're not necessarily going to want to put a car dismantling company in the transitional zone. Or we're not going to want to put, indoor, maybe a bowling alley, right next to residences, or something of that nature, right? So you're going to want to think about the noise impacts. You're going to want to think about the
Type thing.
more office, traditional, maybe open, it's an operation that's closed, in the nighttime, not something that's a 24-hour type facility, so that the residences, when they turn their lights out at night, so has the commercial business, right?
Other comments, questions, whatever.
I should know this, I served on the committee. On the mill site, did we extend the CBD overlay or just commercial overlay?
So we show the central business district going further to the south. Yeah. Again, that's a
All the way
concept-
through the mill?
all the way down to the mill site along Main Street. Now, that's a conceptual plan, and so the council could say, hey, notwithstanding our conceptual plan, we're going to build this transition zone, and that's going to be kind of the filler between the mill site and the central business district to be compatible with the buildings that are the residences that are along that section of the street.
And the CBD can be as many stories as we want, if up to 8 stories.
8
or-
with setbacks, yeah.
And the commercial district is a height limitation, is that what it is?
General commercial zone, yeah, it's height limited. I can't remember the maximum height. I think it's 30 plus feet. Yeah, 35 maybe.
Because I'm wondering if we didn't make a little bit of a mistake when we did that overlay. Is why I'm bringing this up, and it's what you're talking about, the transitional, and maybe it should be more transitional or more commercial when we get down there, instead of having this. My only problem with, I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth. I can argue either side, the historic and the code change. We have to be very careful. We have to be very thoughtful on this, because if you do the historic, we're going to have more than likely, you're going to keep the big, beautiful trees that are there, which is going to create issues with some of the mill site revitalization, the bicycle paths that were proposed that don't necessarily have to be there. But to keep those trees and to keep the neighborhood the way it is, even with a transitional zone, you have to remember they're very large lots. And so one thing we have to be very careful on is you have very large lots that could be broken into multiple lots, because they are large lots. And when you go into the transitional zone, those large lots become very lucrative to developers that want to put more housing in. And so they could all be sixplexes in there immediately. So you got to be careful on how we word this transitional.
But if we,
Residential, you're going to have, if you're allowing residential in there, you have to be careful, because under the state rules right now, you can't eliminate those multi-use house, that mid.
You can't say no residential in there.
Right.
So, but if you're,
Well, you can't say your density concerns are huge.
but I mean, if the current homeowners are there, they're the homeowners, that's residential, is that considered allowing residential or new residential? New residential. Right, so,
So are we going to keep it a historic district that allows, I'm just throwing out,
and it doesn't even have to be historic, right? Because then that's really hard to deal with later on down the road as people.
you don't, well, what I'm saying is if you, I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. If you don't put a historic district in, that area will change dramatically. I don't know if you can codify yourself out of it. Because if you go up to Portland right now, and I'm going to use Portland, and they're buying large lots, and they're putting 6 to 10 houses on each lot. And under the current code, we can't downgrade, from my understanding. I don't know how, do you have ideas on how to stop
I
that?
think it becomes really difficult to, in the current climate of build as much housing as fast as you can in Oregon. It's kind of the governor's push. They've made it very easy for housing developers to build housing and to build a lot of it. And so you do have to be careful. There's redevelopment opportunities. And so when you're looking at crafting a new zone, you just have to be sensitive to make sure we're following all the legal challenges that you have to do, the kind of the hurdles you have to jump through to create that zone. There's even laws that allow residential to be built in commercial zones. And so you can't just say, hey, if we create commercial, then we eliminate the residential problem. That's not true, right? Because there are laws that allow residences to be built in commercial areas. Now, not a lot of residential developers are seeking those opportunities today in cities like Dallas. They're pursuing those in cities like Portland and cities like Eugene. But I think Councilor Schilling's point is a valid one that we have to think about and just be thoughtful when we're creating that zone. I don't. Yeah, creating the historic.
Commercial.
Yes, creating the historic district makes it more challenging for new development to be built in a historic district, right? It has to meet a higher level threshold of design, elements and things of that nature. You could create the historic district and change the zoning to this transitional zoning, and whatever your uses allow in that transitional zone and the design standards of the zone have to be met in addition to the historic standards, right? So there's just additional regulatory process that makes it more expensive to develop if there's a historic district, but you also are more likely to achieve the desired outcome of a development that looks and feels like the neighborhood that you're trying to preserve. We haven't really got to that part of the exercise yet of where we'd want to see this zoning, how far south, how far east, how far west does it extend? That's just a conversation that we'd have. We're really presenting right now just kind of high-level concept options, right, of does the council want to kind of pursue any of these? And if you say, hey, I like the idea of a historic district with a transitional zone, then we can start to do an exercise of where does that make sense on the map and bring that back to this committee to consider, those areas. And then you can let us know, hey, let's pull it back, or we went too far, or we're not far enough, and we can have that conversation at a future meeting.
Issue with funding for some of those studies.
So the Historic Preservation District, we would want to get CLG, Certified Local Government Grant Funds for that. And we're operating in the 25 and 26 year cycle right now. And those funds are already committed to other projects. And so we'd be looking at a 27 fiscal year cycle. So we're probably at least a year to 2 years away from starting a historic preservation or historic district conversation. Or fund it ourselves, but I don't see this to be an immediate concern. I think we have time. Time's on our side.
Just gonna make sure I reiterate, just because I was talking about historical districts doesn't mean that I was totally in favor of that.
Oh, that provides me with exactly the segue I was looking for. Thank you. I'm not a fan of the historic district idea. I don't like straitjackets, period, and it is one. It may be a straitjacket in good cause, given the circumstances and what's happening on the ground, but the idea of locking ourselves in because unwiring one is actually harder than even the impression Brian gave you. They're very hard to unwire. It seems to me that we can control just about everything we want to control using other mechanisms that don't cast rebar and concrete metaphorically. I'm not at all a fan of the historic district route.
And just to,
Except for the historic district, you can't, control 6 houses on one line.
Well, and I would point out that in this older part of town we're talking about, nobody's trying to do any of those things right now.
Well, not right now, because it's not zoned.
Yeah, I think
And as long as it isn't, they won't.
I think we need to really do a deeper analysis on, current statutory requirements with housing, as we look at if the committee is in favor of kind of exploring this transitional zoning, a mixed-use downtown zone, that'll be kind of step one, is to evaluate the current laws, what's allowed, what type of housing do we need to allow in this zone to be consistent with those laws. We could also look at, types of uses that would make sense in a transitional zone. We can evaluate other cities, kind of their own zoning codes.
Well, I have to agree with that. If we're going to go forward with that down that path, there's a lot more drilling down in the lot.
Yeah, and so we can do a lot of that, bring that back so that you have a better understanding of what that transitional zone looks like, right? And we're step one of a mile-long exercise here. And so
As you said, we've got time, so why don't we go that way? Why don't we flesh it out more and learn more of the ifs, ands, and buts?
is there a kind of group consensus around a transitional mixed-use downtown zoning that you want us to do some exploration
Certainly
on?
would like to know more about what it would look like, yeah.
All right, so why don't we do
What the
that?
issues would be.
Tyler will, let's look at the current statutory requirements regarding housing. As we develop that, we can also come back, having looked at other cities, downtown kind of transitional zones, types of uses that are allowed and aren't allowed, so we can kind of pull from that for what we might want to consider on our own zoning. And we'll be able to have a better understanding of what housing requirements would be required today under current law.
Just correct me if I'm wrong, but on the historical district, it wouldn't have to be the entire length. Couldn't it be, the reason I bring this back up is that's Main Street is a very iconic street down there. And there are a lot of very beautiful old homes in that neighborhood that have been very well maintained. There are a lot of single stories, there's a lot of story and a halves and I'm wondering if we shouldn't also take a look. I mean, I know we don't like the historic district, but we do like the historic district in some ways.
And I
so
would
how many
even-
houses would be affected, or could we gerrymander it? Because I think to be a historic district, the homeowners have to sign on. Is that
I would
correct?
really encourage, if you want to look at historic preservation, and we didn't talk about it today, and maybe I'm cutting off Tyler's comment here, is individual resources can be identified on the National Register. And I think there are some homes within our community that would qualify for that on Main Street. And so they could become individually listed properties without doing a historic district. And, so you might have, there's a couple homes on Main, and I think it's maybe Ash Street or near there, might be Clay, that are really nice. And those would probably be eligible for national register, on the National Register as standalone resources. So
But then the house next door could be a three-story
Correct.
building.
could be
two-story.
two-story. I mean, it could comply with the transitional zoning requirements, whatever those are. Yes.
I mean, I'm not even that concerned about the historical district. I'm kind of concerned about the residents that live there, and
As far as an architectural portion, I believe, to the types of siding that go in, the reveals to make it look.
You can you can really drill down the design elements. You could say all the windows in your building have to be wood. I mean, you could do that as a city, and you could require really hefty design requirements. And some communities do that, right? If they want their main street to have a certain look and feel, they just create really hefty design requirements, and they look good, right? And they're cohesive, and it's a tourist draw. So you could do that for your transitional zone to make sure we would evaluate, what the homes around there look like, how they feel, and create design standards in your transitional zoning that mirror that. So that way, whatever gets built in the future would blend in.
We certainly want to do a deeper dive into this. I'm looking at the zoning map right now, and it just so happens that the central business district currently ends at Clay Street, and from Clay Street down to the mill site, it's mostly residential high density right there on Main Street today. That's how it's zoned. So we might want to do something about putting some controls in place, and a deeper dive is definitely called for here.
Zoning, you could get to what Mike was talking about with multi-story housing, within the current zoning. So you're actually creating a zoning that would mimic more the existing built infrastructure, the homes, as opposed to what the possibility is under current zoning. Yeah. So we have more RH than is required under our current
Especially with our new.
under our current housing needs analysis. So I think we would probably be okay with DLCD on that, but that's a consideration.
Always a crapshoot with those folks.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move forward, have you move forward with more research into what a transitional zone would look like and what opportunities and limitations it would prevent and impose.
And
Okay.
we'll bring that back at the next Public Administration Committee meeting.
So that before we proceed. Okay, next up is the noise ordinance.
Perfect. I'll invite our Assistant City
Tyler.
Manager, Emily Gagne, to come up and present on this topic. So as a reminder, this topic was referred to the committee by the council at your last council, or 2 council meetings ago, from Councilor Holtzapfel, who received a kind of complaint about the current noise ordinance and wanted just to do a review of our ordinance, so.
The fireworks?
No, I think it was radio.
Radio, yeah.
Yeah,
Radio,
loud
okay.
music being played. Yeah, inside of a house that was heard from another house during daytime hours.
And I believe the police had said if it's between the hours of 7 and 10, 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., there's nothing that they could do. I mean, our code on page 23 of your packet does say a noise disturbance is any sound that annoys or disturbs a reasonable person of normal sensitivities. So you could, outside of those hours that were cited, you could be cited for a noise ordinance violation.
So that really is a training issue with our
Correct.
law enforcement and
Correct.
code services to make sure that they understand that if it's between 7 and 10, there's not like a carte blanche exemption to noise. If it's causing a noise disturbance, you can cite them for that.
Most of the specific times that are in here are attached to specific types of violations, idling engines, one thing and another. So, yeah, there's maneuvering room there.
So then in your packet, we did include, Kim got some other unnecessary noise ordinances from other cities. Some of them are very outdated and reference things like gramophones and Victrolas, which our code eliminated when we did our update last. And you'll notice like McMinnville has specific decibel measurements that it would be very difficult, I think, for our police and code services to be able to monitor that. So I would recommend not doing something like that. City of Monmouth, they have factors that talk about proximity of the sound to sleeping facilities or, things like that. Some of them reference if you can hear it from 50 feet away. So there are a variety of ways that it is dealt with. Pendleton is the one that said, the operation of sound producing device so that it is plainly audible at a distance of 50 feet from a building. There are different ways of getting at it. This is kind of just for you guys to take a look at and see if.
Monmouth has decimal readings also.
So where is ours deficient in applying some reasonable tools to the law enforcement to keep things quiet? Where are we falling down in ours?
I think, like Brian said, part of it is just training to be able to say, just because it's listed in 3 as a violation per se, those aren't the only violations. You also have to read section, number 2, where it says a noise disturbance is anything that annoys or disturbs a reasonable person. And they've got other reasonable person things that they need to follow. I think that's fairly easy for them to.
Some language that says something like noise disturbance means any sound and blah, 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 not limited to, but includes the following, or?
Well, and 3 says the following acts are declared to be a noise disturbance per se. This subsection shall not be deemed to limit noise disturbances for the purposes of this section to those enumerated herein.
I think we've got the legal mechanism here.
To educate the police?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more a matter of training and an application of policy, because, for example, number 2 there is pretty much of a carte blanche blank check.
Number 2 is really just kind of definitions for subsection 1, which is the teeth, right? Number 1, no person shall create, assist in creating, permit, continue, or permit the continuance of any noise disturbance. Section 2 defines what that noise disturbance is and what plainly audible means. And then section 3 gives some specific examples of noise disturbances, not limited to those. I think where, the application of that within our staff has been, if it falls under number 3, then clearly that's a violation, we can cite you. If it's not under number 3 and it's between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., then you're okay. And that's just not true.
Like I said, training and policy application.
Right, so it really feels like we've kind of, built this, culture of application of our code in a certain way that is limiting what we actually have authority to do. And so through our read of the code, we feel that we can, enforce and cite people to, not create a noise disturbance if they're creating that noise disturbance, regardless of the hours and regardless of how they're creating that noise disturbance. If it is a sound that annoys or disturbs a reasonable person of normal sensitivities, then we can, right.
Just all day.
All day long, that's really unprovoked, or someone who's playing the theme song to the Love Boat on repeat, very loudly out their kitchen window while they do dishes for hours on end or whatever they're doing, that could be considered a noise disturbance. So it's there's certainly some discretion here, but I think our officers and our code enforcement staff have an ability to make those decisions and create a more livable situation when there are clearly noise disturbances taking place.
Bottom line here is I don't think we need new legal language to solve this problem. It's an administrative matter fundamentally.
I did see the fine was $142 minimum. Is that something we could look at increasing or should increase?
Look at our attorney to know if that's. Is that based on any state law?
2 second offense, 242 third, second, or
I don't think that matches the current fee schedule for violations, but I'd have to double check that.
Cities.
I guess I just wonder, who decides how long a dog is barking and who decides how loud something is and who decides how long, if they just turned up one song that they really like and wanted to dance on their patio? You know what I'm saying? Who decides?
It's the enforcing officer, right? So if
police would have to get there.
yeah, if our code enforcement, it gets called out to that, they would be the ones that would go out and listen.
I mean, one day my son was out washing his car and he was playing the most foul rap music and I said, dude, we have neighbors. They don't want to listen to that. But he's just a kid washing his car, so.
Yeah, and so, what's a noise disturbance to one person is not to another. Some people that have dogs oftentimes will hear their neighbor's dog bark and be like, well, glad it's not mine today, but I'm going to allow it to go on. Where another neighbor who maybe doesn't have a dog will complain.
She works all day long, but her dog is outside just barking all day, so.
Some people that will be annoying and they'll call that in, and other people, they don't. So it's, right, and some people make that decision as well. But I think that, again, the issuing officer, the responding officer, whether they're code enforcement or police, would be the one that would make that decision. But as we've discovered and have talked about today, we really feel that we have the ability to do more enforcement than we have been doing. And our response to say, well, if it's between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., they can do what they want, is not accurate. And that's just a training that we'll make sure is conveyed to the appropriate staff.
Is that where we fell down with the situation with?
Yep. Yeah, with Holt's Apple situation, yeah. And I know that that's been the same direction, probably at least on a dozen other complaints in the past. So, yeah, it really is a training and re-education of what the ordinance means and what it says.
Do have a time change, permanent standard time, we will be revisiting this. Because state law will require construction sites to not be able to work during the cool hours of the day, so we'll have to look at exceptions.
That brings up a question. If we make a change at city council for ordinances, how is that, is there regular meetings with our police officers that convey that to them, or do they just
So, yeah, so if we make a change to an ordinance that affects a department, that is conveyed to that department, generally to the department head, and the department head would then convey it to their staff. So, yes.
One of them should be here anyway.
It's really no different from anything else. Anytime we enact an ordinance that specifically affects some department in City Hall, those folks are told about it and discuss and taught how to deal with it, whether it's the police or anybody else. Alrighty, next, memorials and public art in public spaces.
Excellent. So I'll invite our Public Works Director, Jennifer Ward, to come up and present on this. As a reminder, it started with buildings and started with public admin, was referred to the Parks Advisory Board, and after their review is now back to the committee. So Jennifer.
Yeah, that's correct, Brian. So this did go to the Parks Advisory Committee at their June meeting. They had some minor feedback that has been incorporated into the draft that's included in your packet, and I highlighted those, but I will just go over it for you. So on page 2 of the actual policy, there's a bulleted list, and I guess this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe bullet point number 11, the approval or denial. So the way it was worded previously, the Parks Board had, it was indicating that the Parks Board would have authority to deny these requests that came through them. They believed, and I believe that they're correct, that that's not an authority that resides with the Parks Board. So they would be, as these proposals come before them, they would then bring to the City Council a recommendation to approve or deny. So there's that. If you, it's rather, it's a recommend. So rather than, it used to say that they could outright deny it, and now it's they recommend to approve or deny. Okay. If you flip the page to the section, so this is page 3 of the policy, decommissioning and removal. They wanted to just have the city to have a little bit more flexibility in circumstances in which they might remove or relocate a memorial or public art. And so wording has been included there. And then the last one is actually in the application itself. So page 2 of the application, under proposed location, the original wording had a map or a detailed site plan was optional, and they removed that option. They want to make sure that a site plan or map is included as part of the application. And with that, they send it back to you.
I just have a question on the definition of, are these new or is this existing policies? The criteria, is that new or existing?
But the criteria for, the whole policy is new. Yeah.
What does diversity and inclusion mean? The approving authority will consider the diversity of the city's population when reviewing proposals.
Tell me where you are.
44, just above the red letters, last bullet point.
Oh, I see, okay. I think just that, that they will consider the demographics of our city, and whether those are, consistent, or whether we, want to, recognize groups that.
I was wondering how a memorial for something or someone would have anything to do with that.
Wondering, is the thrust of that to encourage certain types of art, or is it to provide a way of denying things that might be offensive. You know, two sides of the coin.
There are. I think it would be more the latter.
I suspected it might be. Maybe we should have language that just says that more specifically. I'm not sure how you'd word it, but if the real goal is to make sure that we have the authority to stop things, you know, like painting swastikas where there shouldn't be any, maybe the language ought to be a little more explicit about that's what we're doing here.
I think you see that really under the first criteria for approval, Councilor Shane, where it says historical or cultural significance. It's on page 43. The following representations are prohibited: profanity, nudity or sexual themes, images or language related to gangs or hate groups, images or language promoting violence, abuse, or torture, religious iconography. So those are things that are excluded. I would just remind the council with this policy and the criteria, some of these are pretty squishy, right, and flexible. And you as a council will have the ability to say yes or no to any memorial that comes before you using these criteria. So to answer your question on what, Councilor Briggs's question on what diversity and inclusion means, that's really a discretionary decision that you as a council get to make, right? You're going to say, hey, we're going to consider, because we say we will consider the diversity of the city's population when reviewing the proposals. So you might say if, for example, maybe we want to put in a memorial or a statue of cultural significance to the Russian population, right, of Russia. And we might say, that's interesting because our demographics in Dallas, Oregon, represent very few from, the land of Russia. It's odd that we would want to memorialize that here in Dallas. So we're going to deny that because it doesn't really make sense to have that particular memorial here, where maybe another city in Oregon, or another city somewhere else, has a large, population of immigrants from Russia, and it might make sense to memorialize them in that way. So I think that's really what this is looking at, is you're going to say, on a case-by-case review of the memorial, if that memorial makes sense with kind of your population, the diversity, the makeup of your community, the culture of your community. So it gives you the ability to say, yes or no, right? We have, a good tie to the community, the Grand Ronde, right? Tribe, Native American tribe in Dallas. A lot of their community members live here or from here. And, maybe a memorial representing, their culture would make sense in our community. And we can justify that by saying, hey, we have, several members of the Grand Ronde community that live, in Dallas, that call Dallas home, that work here. And we want to recognize this, that group of individuals in our community by, having this memorial. So that would be the other side of that argument, to support a memorial that might recognize that group that is in your community. So that's just two examples
Why are we
how I
stating
think
it
how I
twice?
think that could be used. What's
Why
that?
why are we stating it twice then? Because criteria for approval, historic or cultural significance, memorials must commemorate groups, events, or ideas of significant historical or cultural importance to the city or represent important community values. So why do we even have it in there?
Doesn't have to be in there.
I'd
So
say-
this is your opportunity
Yeah, I'd just say
to
strike it.
craft the policy how you'd like. I'm just letting you know of some examples of how that could be used.
I hear you.
So
Are you suggesting we?
Just that bullet point.
So do you want to remove
It's
the-
restating exactly what we just talked about.
yeah. So you want to remove the diversity and inclusion statement at the
I think
end?
it's already in there.
Yeah, because it's included.
I
right
know
above.
it states it.
Yep.
Historical and cultural significance.
Yep.
It'd
I
almost
agree with
be
that.
exclusive if we excluded that Russian family who wanted to put a memorial in, only because they're the only family here. So I would rather not even go down that road, just.
If this were
that language.
downtown Atlanta and somebody wanted to put up a statue to General Sherman, we would say no, and we have the authority to do that kind of control here, so. Yeah.
That change, are there any other changes you want to see to the policy?
Jennifer,
take
you
that.
might remove the reference to the Administrative Services Manager on the top of page 43. And just say Public Works Department. Since we
Indeed.
don't have that position anymore.
Kind of changed the organization since we started this policy review.
That's true. When this went to the Parks Board, there was an administrative services manager, and now there isn't.
What, is there anything else that we should explicitly exclude? It might be something you think about. I'm not thinking of anything, but that's your big teeth in it.
Yeah, just a wording, this is just a legalistic thing, but from a wording standpoint, right, the next sentence after the one about the administrative services manager says, sponsors must submit a complete application, including, the implication is the person submitting the application has to do all of those things, and that's not what, a lot of those bullets aren't things that would go in an application. So I think a little more clarity would be called for there.
May include rather than including.
Well, it's not just that, it's review by the Parks Advisory Board. That's not something that goes on an application that has to be prepared by the submitter. That's something that happens after the application comes in for processing. But the way that one sentence is worded, it implies that all of those bullets have to be things that are in the application. It's just kind of sloppy. Just sloppy wording, that's all.
Okay.
So I guess we'll see this again, or do you want to, what's your sense? Do you want to have this cleaned up and then taken straight to the council, or do we want to see it again? Straight to the council? Yeah. There's your direction.
I have a recommended motion on this, Jennifer, I can't recall.
Motion.
Yeah. So there is a recommended motion on page 41 of your packet. It says, I move to forward to the City Council the approval and installation of memorials and public art policy with a due pass recommendation. We can include in that motion, as revised by the direction of the committee.
So moved.
Seconded. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Good. That's everything on the printed agenda. I have one other thing to bring up. It'll just take a moment. Earlier this year, we had a discussion about looking at the types of uses permitted by our development code in the central business district. I don't want that slipping through the cracks. Can we have that come back to us at our next meeting, please?
Yeah, so I think that's we can couple that with the mixed use transitional zone discussion. So today we talked more about the expansion opportunities of the central business district. But yes, we'll want to make sure that we also re-evaluate the permitted uses in the CBD. So we'll do that at your next meeting.
I have no problem with having the combined discussion, but there are two different timelines and courses of action because the
Yes.
CBD is something we can deal with immediately. Where this comes from is things like Tim's Garage and not having any more of those pop up. So that's something we don't need to wait for all that other long process. Perfectly fine to have the discussion at the same time, but let's keep in mind that they're separate actions.
Yeah, we'll have two different staff reports so that they're clearly separate and not combining those efforts together, but we'll bring them back at the same time.
If we could get maybe a better map detail where the.
Central business district. So I think when we bring back the transitional zone, we'll also identify on the map where that transitional zone could be applied. So, and we'll highlight different areas. Yep.
Pictures of some of the residences that are in there. Just.
Anything else for the good of the order? Then I will declare the Public Administration Committee meeting adjourned at 5:19, and you're up.
Committee at 5:19, and with only the addition of myself in the role, I think that will be fine. And the first order is to approve the minutes.
Approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved unanimously. On to the second item on the agenda, and that's EV chargers. Brian.
Thank you, Chair Schilling. So this is not an action item today. It's really just doing some follow-up from the last meeting. We're still doing some research on gathering more information about different vendors and opportunities there for the future. Again, noting that we've signed our software agreement with our current company a few months back, and so that's an annual agreement. So we have some time built into doing that evaluation. So we'll bring the kind of completion of that research at a future meeting. But I did just want to point out that we've had at least one full month pass since the last meeting. And so you can see the delta between what was collected in revenue and what was billed as far as electricity. Noting again that this was in June, so your rate increase from 4 cents to 8 cents was not in effect. So for June, the total charging was over 10,000 minutes minus the 703 minutes that the city vehicle used, so just under 10,000. And the total revenue was $384.24. And then the electricity for those charging stations in June was $539.53. So we had a loss of $155.26. Now, if you do the simple math and say if we charged the total of 8 cents instead of 4 cents, we would actually have a positive profit of around the same amount, a little bit more than that, actually. So I think going from 4 cents to 8 cents was a positive thing. We've looked at the data for July. We're trending on the same amount of electricity charge that we had in June. A little over 10,000 minutes is what we expect by the end of the month. But again, because it wasn't a complete month, I didn't want to share that information, and we also didn't have the billing information for July. But I'll continue to present this information on a every 2-month basis as we go throughout the year, so we can kind of track that and keep that front of mind as we make future decisions. But we have been gathering information on different vendors, and we'll be able to present that hopefully, if not in September, at least by November.
Where it says subtract the city vehicle of 703 minutes, that's,
So we have one fully electric vehicle in our city fleet, and so we charge it at those stations. So yeah, so the private sector is using 9,600 minutes, 700 minutes of charging. So
but the city is, are we still paying?
we don't pay.
We don't
So
pay.
when we charge, it's no charge. Yeah. So the revenue there is,
I'm just
yes,
wondering.
so the revenue is just the private contribution, so. Yeah, and there's a little bit of rounding there, right? So it's 10,413 minutes minus 703, which is 9,710 minutes. So if you did that by 4 cents, it's actually like $388. But again, it's not all full minutes. It's down really to the seconds. So you're off by a few dollars for that reason. But again, if you were charging 8 cents per minute, you would be a little north of $760.
And will some of those, I guess, profits, I don't like to call them profits because there's other expenses with those. Will those help to offset or pay for software upgrades and?
Yeah, it wouldn't, if you ran out the math fully, it wouldn't fully cover the software package, but you would net probably about $2,500 a year, I believe was what we calculated. And your software is about $4,000 a year. So you're, about $1,500 to $2,000 short of what you would need. So
That's with the
Revenue,
8
not
cents?
profit.
That's with the 8 cents rate?
that's with the 8 cents.
Okay,
See
can we go,
these pay for themselves.
can we go back?
So
Okay, we're taking the 703 minutes out for our vehicle, but that should actually be counted in there also as far as that fuel would, if it was fueled, it would be profit, I mean, not profit, it'd be revenue. So this isn't really telling the true story. That it's actually a little bit better than this because
it's a
we're
little bit
benefiting
better.
703 minutes of charging.
Right. That we're not charging.
No,
It's not covering the
well,
cost. So that's,
I'm just making sure that we do our math as math. And then the other thing is like Counselor Fitzgerald said, it does not cover the maintenance of the hardware.
It would not cover the software cost. It doesn't cover the full software cost, nor does it cover any like maintenance or other stuff. You're getting basically $2,500 a year that would be above the electricity charge or the electricity cost of those stations. So that could be applied to maintenance. It could be applied to the software.
Maybe an access fee to the.
Right.
to
So
them, or I don't know, but
our thought
they
is
should pay for themselves.
we understand that EV Connect is just too expensive, right? To be able to run at a net zero operating to revenues. So that's why we're exploring other vendors. We do know that there are some out there just in our preliminary research that are going to be a better deal for the city. But again, we don't have all that information. We want to have kind of a full package of information to share with you at a future meeting. So our goal is to get them to be, cost neutral, or, at least cost neutral or better.
I
for
mean,
us.
I don't think we should necessarily make money, but
Correct. So that's the goal, and we have several months to figure that out.
And the one at the aquatic center I rode my bike by today is still out of service,
Yes.
and that's going to be, there's no way to fix it, right?
You would. No way to fix it for free. Right. No way to fix it for free. So yeah, and then that's a fast charger, which allows 2 vehicles to charge. So, then we have the fast charger out back that's also inoperable. So our 2 fast chargers are inoperable. We're not going to, replace those. We're really figuring out how do we build a system that is cost neutral for the city in the long term, noting that we have the 4 slow chargers in the back of City Hall that are functional, they're operational, they're charging 8 cents per minute now. And we should have, a little bit of, $2,000+ on hand at the end of that. If we don't renew a subscription in the future, that can be applied to whatever we do with a future vendor, assuming we can get to a deal
Fast
with that.
chargers burn the same amount of electricity as the slow chargers, or do they use more? So the electricity bill is higher operating those. Okay. And when they were working, were we charging the same price for both?
Charged more for the fast chargers than we did for the slow chargers.
Just making sure.
Yeah. But we didn't adjust those fees with the last fee update just because
They were going away.
they're not operable right now, so there's no point in doing that.
Kind of academic, yeah.
Yep.
Just as a matter of interest, where does that revenue come in? Does that flow into the general fund?
It's into the street fund,
Okay.
and the expenses are paid out of the street fund.
Moving on to the second, which is actually item D, is the second camera in council chambers, and actually I need to amend that just slightly. It's not just a second council and council chambers, it's also allowing for the slides to be up.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that down below here. So in the report, I just say the question's also been raised about sharing PowerPoint presentations on the YouTube feed. Staff are continuing to research how to best do that. So we know that we can, through our Zoom account, do presenter mode for the slides. It's just a matter of how we, budget our city recorder's time to be able to take minutes, do roll call votes, and also thumb through slides. So we think we can get there. We're just looking into that. So I don't have a firm answer on that today, but I do have a firm answer on the presenter view camera. So just like we have the camera that's showing this council dais up here, the question was, can we have a camera that points the other direction to make sure we're hitting the presenter and the audience as well? And the answer is yes, we can do that. And you can have both cameras running at the same time. We're figuring out still how to do like a camera, camera in camera.
Split screen or
view.
something.
Split screen. You can toggle between 2 cameras. We did a little bit of trouble working through that today with a camera temporarily set up in here. So we know that that's a possibility. We did get a quote for a new camera and the installation from our information services provider, the county. You're looking at about a little under $700 to be able to do that, which is, I think, a fine deal. It would be the same quality camera that we have showing the council room here. And so it's just a matter of kind of pulling the trigger on that, using the council expenses line in the budget to be able to pay for that, which I think would be fine.
Camera position going to be?
What's that?
Where would the camera position be?
Probably be above the mayor's area here.
Shooting back down.
Shooting back down at the presenter.
Is there any reason that we can't just put it on the sidewall? Just to keep the dais looking a little more presentable?
Sure. Yeah, we can evaluate the different options for that and look to see where the camera can make sense. Yeah, I mean, even that camera has the ability to rotate side to side, so we could offset something maybe over here, over there, and just angle it down.
The count,
Because it's a shorter run,
Yeah.
it has to come to my laptop.
that's kind of what I was thinking. And the reason I brought that up, that's how the county runs it. The one up front is in the corner. It's just, and plus it wouldn't be a huge mount on the ceiling.
It
Yeah, but if it's hanging down from the mayor, so,
Well, it doesn't hang that low.
yeah.
He's not
Well,
that tall.
It would not be that low.
Yeah.
We would hang it higher, but we can definitely put it in the corner because it has a zoom on it.
We can come up with something that works, that's for sure.
I think
So we can certainly do that.
700's great. I don't have any problem
that's
with that. And I know it, Counselor Jantz brought it up to me, and I'm sure we've each heard it from our constituents that they would like to see who's presenting. And I think even more important though, and I know it's part of our recorder's time, clerk's time, what's your title? Seeing what we're talking about is actually more important than seeing the person talking about it.
Yeah, and that's I don't think that's overly challenging. It's a question of do you figuring out either how the presenter, as they advance the slides, that could be done through the YouTube, right? So it's either having them do it, or another way of having it done is having Kim, our recorder, have the slide show loaded up on her computer, and as they advance, she would advance. So that's just what we're figuring out. What's the best way to make that happen? So we know we can do it. It's just what's the best way to make that happen so that it's a smooth process.
My preference as far as split screen, I would not split the screen.
So right now, it's really
You
looking
do
at.
picture in picture.
No, just whoever's, I would assume we have a hot mic and it can pick up a
Oh,
hot
like
mic.
Zoom, whoever's talking is who you see.
Yeah, so it's either gonna be them or it's gonna be us.
It's manual, but yes.
Yes. And the only reason I say that is after watching individuals eat their dinner one night, it's hard to see city council even on the full screen.
Have to upgrade her title, city recorder and technical director.
Yeah. So no, but I think our city recorder can just toggle back and forth between the cameras, and so in general, as the presenter's presenting, it'll be easy enough for her to just presenter's talking, that camera, camera 2. All right, now the presenter's done talking, back to camera 1. If there's a question for the presenter, ask the question, then go to camera 2 to go back to the presenter for the answer, and so I think it can be manually just toggled back and forth with the cameras.
In a
So-
television studio, technical director is the term for the guy who sits in front of the bank of switches, selecting cameras and controlling what you see.
And this is just a recommendation. I don't think we even have to get quite that toggling back and forth as much. I think if the presenter's presenting, we're on them, and then questions answered, you're just on council.
Yeah, I mean,
Make it simple.
however we want to do it. So
Unless you're feeling bored.
we'll play with it as we do it. But
We'll get more comfortable with it with experience, like everything.
there's ways for it to be done, and we can make that happen for under $700.
And
that's
pretty
it.
much done with that.
That's it. So just
And there's
information
nothing-
sharing.
There's what?
That was just information sharing for those 2 items.
And seeing there's nothing else on the agenda, this meeting is adjourned at 5:33.
Since we're talking about, before we close, technology, how's our podcast going?
Great. So we're going to be doing our first recording week after next. So that's scheduled. I've reviewed the scripts that have been put together for that. Allison's done a great job at putting that together. She's budgeted her time to put that together just so we understand how much time it's taking her to do the prep work. She'll be out of the office 2 days after the recording. One of those days will be a working day where she'll be able to edit. So she'll, again, track her time on editing those. But we expect to have, I think there's 5 Mondays in September. So we have 5 podcasts lined up. 3 of those will be recorded week after next. And then the next 2 would be recorded later in August and then edited. The first one's going to be kind of the summer construction projects that we worked on, and Jennifer Ward's going to be the first guest on that. Our second week is Leadership Dallas, because the chamber is taking on Leadership Dallas this next year, and so we'll interview the chamber director, Tara Townley, for that program, and it's a way to, because they'll be advertising that program at that time to get people to join Leadership Dallas for the next year, so it's just.
Made that official at the last chamber board meeting. We
Yes.
voted it in.
Yep.
So it's
So that
official.
will be a good opportunity for the chamber, working with the city, to talk about kind of the transition of how that took place and promote that program, so that people in the community listening to the podcast will know that opportunity exists. Then week 3 is a conversation with our traffic safety officer, Ben Parise, to kind of learn about the traffic safety program and, what to do and not do in the community, maybe some hot spots to watch out for to not get a ticket, whatever he wants to talk about. So that'll be great. And then the fourth week is a conversation with the city councilor, and our council president will be doing that podcast. And then week 5 is fall sports in the community. So our athletic director, Ron Snively, will be invited to come in and speak about that.
It's the narrator or the interviewer.
Fall sports. So it will be like fall, like.
Oh, fall.
Yeah, the fall. So cross country, football, soccer, volleyball, things like that.
And
Fall.
And Charlie's the host.
What's that?
And Charlie's the host.
And Charlie, our economic and community development director, is the host of the podcast. So.
That's good.
Yep, so that's what's going on. So it's been fun to put together, and Allison's done a good job at creating kind of a consistent intro and exit to the podcast. So that's being wrapped up right now. It's good kind of shots of the city as you kind of go in with the consistent music and voiceover on that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Be a lot of fun. So.
Now that there is no other items on the agenda this